Blanche and I went to a bat mitzvah yesterday in New Jersey. I saw a collective of family members that I have not seen together in a very long time. And it was really heartening, warm-hearted, expansive, beautiful experience, out of which a lot of insights arrived. But the most unexpected insight was the rabbi at the temple, who was very soft-spoken, open-hearted, real. And I was very affected by him, and I was affected by the cantor, and first night the cantors. So the harmonies were so beautiful. But a number of things got said that were really meaningful to me, and I want to share them, for better or for worse. Because I don't revisit biblical space a lot. But it turned out that the Torah portion that let me describe her in my life, grandniece, was the Exodus from Egypt. And one of the strange comments for me was that the Red Sea was not, in fact, called the Red Sea. It was called the Reed Sea. Now, if this is true biblically or not, I have no idea. But as a conversation coming up in the middle of a service, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's a redefinition of the word, but more than that, a redefinition of my image of the Red Sea, which was completely formulated by Cecil B. DeMille and Charlton Heston, and it was, pretty massive and amazing, and the sea parts and people walk through the sea, and I'm going, I always liked that, but I always had a hard time kind of with that level of attention to the human dilemma by the powers that be. But the Reed Sea made sense to me, because it may have been a sea of reeds that one could conceivably walk through, especially if it wasn't that flooded. And again, forgive me if I'm affecting all of you in your belief systems, but the idea of a reed sea, especially at low tide or whatever you want to call it, might in fact have been passable, walkable. Scary, because you didn't know, maybe if you can see the water levels, how deep it really went. But in terms of the possibility of crossing it, it offered a kind of trust. Could I do this? Which I understand and I respect. And then the rabbi described Moses having to lead the people into the Red Sea. And in the Charlton Heston version, he stands on a mountain, the Red Sea parts, and he watches the Jewish people move through the Red Sea. In this telling, Moses had to enter first. And he walks into the Reed Sea, and it starts to go higher and higher and higher and higher. And he's walking, and he's going, I don't know. I don't know about this. And, you get to a point where it's really like, this may not be the thing I'm supposed to be doing, and there's about 500,000 people behind me, and what do I do here? And he kept walking, and it stopped here. And he went, And he kept going into the Red Sea. He trusted something. And the people came with him, and my guess is the shorter people were lifted up. Maybe it got shallower and deeper at different points. But as he was walking through the Reed Sea, he was able to make a passage. And that passage brought all of these, however many thousands of people, along with him. I don't know how far back the Pharaoh was and his troops and his chariots, but I can only imagine possibly far enough back that maybe it started to rain. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to be a biblical scholar. And maybe when they got into the Reed Sea and their chariots, with the weight of the chariots and the horses and the mud below, absolutely couldn't cross. That it just got to be too soft. Maybe the waters rose just another foot from rain. I have no idea. But what I got out of it was a couple of things. One of them is how much we trust narrative and story, and how important story and belief in story is to us. But I'm working on my autobiography. I've talked about that a lot. I'm pretty close to finalizing it. But Josh and I had a long dialogue in the car yesterday, driving to New Jersey, or driving home from New Jersey, and revisiting a moment in my life that I saw this way and he saw that way. And I suddenly went, well, whose story is real? And we started trying to figure out dates, and we started doing all these different things. And in the end, it looked like Joshua's story was real and mine was not real. And so I'm going, add 5,000 years to this of storytelling, and whose story is real and whose story is not real. And I look back at the story of the Reed Sea, and I go, read, read, not a big shift, dramatically altering, however, the vision that we may have of it, because the story has been told in so many ways by people who may have, in fact, added a little few inches or feet or whatever of water, or subtracted. I don't know the truth of the story. I do know that I felt over the years that I have never witnessed the miracle of a sea parting. I've never witnessed anything quite like that in my life. So in terms of individual life, believing in that, in those ideas, has always been faith of some sort. And yes, I can have faith and hope and belief, but I still have a problem with the Red Sea parting the way it's described, because I've never seen anything approaching it. But during this service, there was another, may be able to bring it up here, guys. I can't promise, but there was another reading that affected me. And I took a photograph of it because I just thought maybe it's worth sharing. On the other hand, as things often go on on phones looking for something, it's not appearing. But I can give you the short of it if I don't find the actual words. Okay, not appearing. But let me tell you the basic idea. Prayer offered to God, to the what is, to affect the worldly situation, is ineffective. Asking for God to part the Red Sea, to get you the job you're hoping for, to bring you the person in your life that you're hoping to get, to take care of the illness that you're going through. You can do that. You can pray for those things. But in this passage, it said, work to change the world, pray to change yourself. And I was very taken by that. It was said more beautifully than I'm saying.
Will you say it again?
Work to change yourself, to change the world, excuse me. Work to change the world, pray to change, for help to change yourself. In other words, you can ask in help to respond to the world and what it does, what it brings you. But to actually make the world other and different, that's your ballpark, your job. It's your work. You have work to do in the world as a body, as a person, as a mind. But if you want help, and it was at the core of Rudy's teaching as well, help me to surrender, to open, and accept, that's where God comes in. Because these higher powers are there to help your being, not your manifested persona. The world is going to do what the world does. We all struggle with the manifested world. It's hard, it's short term, it's impermanent, and it ends badly. in the sense of physical pain and drama and all of that. And often it's filled with that stuff. But who is the being riding through this life that is full of suffering? Well, it's us. We are the manifested version of that which moves through the infinite, internal, unknowable, indescribable truth of being. And you can address that truth. You can find your way to that space with prayer, meditation, sitting still, going inward, and asking for help. Again, it's not going to get you the job necessarily. It's not going to part the road necessarily. But if you walk into the water up to your nose almost, maybe at that point, maybe your courage, your strength, your ability to move into the frightening reality of human experience and take the risk to go forward will be met with something which is not intervention really, but it's like, if you meet me halfway, I will meet you halfway. If you can come into the water up to here, I will not part the water, but I will allow you the courage to walk through it, to go through to the other side. This is really interesting to me because my own experience in life is that when I have risked choices to serve something greater, and I have on a number of occasions, and in a way it's at the core of the book I'm writing because I think it's really important. Having left jobs, let's say, to go to India to find a teacher, having left jobs to go to Indiana to study with a different teacher, and having left a home of not great comfort, but a home in Illinois to start a career in Hollywood with no jobs and nothing there except for someone telling me that my career can only start if I go to California, and a wife who heard those words and went into her boss's office at the university and said, I'm leaving, and went and put our house on the market and said, we're moving to California, to Hollywood. Those are just little instances, but they are pretty significant. And I bring them up because it's a two-way street here. If you're willing to make the effort to put yourself into the world because you trust this guidance, this force, this thing that says, cross the sea, go across the sea, I am with you, move forward. And then you start to go there and you wait for the waters to part, forget it. But if you get to the edge of the water and you say, okay, I'm here, I'm doing it, and you start walking and the water's getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, where is your belief system? It's no longer kind of like prayer. It's like, oh my God, this is real. And you are really walking into it, as we all are, trust me, day to day, we're walking into it. And what happens, I don't know how to describe it, but for me, I moved to Hollywood and suddenly the roots went into the soil and the jobs started to arrive. And I was like, oh, but it would never have happened if I didn't have a wife with courage, the real courage of her commitment to me and to us. If I didn't have the ability to say, okay, which is probably the most I did at that point, terrified of moving like forward. But the opening that took place was an opening that involved saying yes to this very frightening, unknowable nature of the world. And you have to move forward. And the Red Sea or the Reed Sea will allow you to move forward to cross. If Moses had just stood on the sidelines or on the mountain overlooking the sea, I think his entire tribe of Jewish folk would have stood there and go, I'm not doing that. I'm not going into that water. No, forget it. We're going back to Egypt. And I think for many of them, that would have, most of them would have turned around. So you need someone, including yourself, ideally, to make those choices to go forward, to go into the the sea, to go into the place in the world that is hard to go to, that is difficult, that is challenging. And the prayer that you offer is not to part the Red Sea, it's find the strength to guide me and help me through these choices. Give me what I need. Please help me. Help me to accept what's in front of me, the way it's appearing, the way it's arrived. Help me find my way forward. And that you can ask. And the answers that come, in my experience, and those of you who study with Rudy for any length of time, if you go inward and you make this a practice, as Rudy said, as opposed to a dalliance, but if you practice this, you find you have a capacity to, on difficult moments of your life, to go inside and say, I need help. Please help me. And it's not an affectation, it's a knowing, it's powerful. And you go inside and, you know, it may not be instantaneous, it may take a while, but you will be lifted into the help that you asked for. You will be guided into the help that you asked for. And my talk last week, which is resonating still, is what happens when the mind and the story, the narrative that we believe in so strongly, our journey, our this and that, what happens when that starts to dissipate? Like my sister-in-law, whose mind is going, and Blanche and me, who's, just so you know, whose minds are going. And there's great forgetfulness, and there's a real sense of, you know, seeing the unraveling of the narrative, of the story. And what happens when you don't have the mind to say, please help me? What happens when you no longer find the voice to actually go into this place as a practice and ask for help? Well, the revelation for me, kind of during class today, and it came working with Blanche, but but the revelation is kind of what I said last week, but I will say it again. If you lose all the words, you lose the mechanism, you lose the story, so you don't even know how it relates to you as a specific person. But what you find, I think, and I believe, and I will teach you this without knowing it for a fact, that what you find is what a baby finds. All you want in life is not through the mind and the intellect and the memory and trying to sort things out and put it together. All you want is to be held. In the simplest version of life on this planet, what you want is to be held. And you know how to reach for that. Because when you're a little being, you have two things in life. One is being held, and the other is not being held. You're in the crib and nobody's holding you. You're getting hungry, nobody's coming. What do? You cry. You cry out. Ah! That's the whole of it. That is the greatest thing in the world. If you want to see prayer in its ultimate form, you cry. And you are crying. No, there's no words in it. There's no specific ask of this or that. It's what you need in the deepest way, and that is to be held. So, in the worldly sense, you cry out, and often, if you're lucky, your mom hears you and comes in the room, maybe your dad, and they take you out of the crib, and they hold you, or your mother feeds you, and you discover what it means to reach into the world and ask for help in the world to calm you down, to give you what you want. And it's beautiful. And we learn from that, in a way, how to use the world to serve us deeply. But there's another thing that happens in the crib, and you've all experienced it and may have a memory of it. You're lying there and you're crying, you practice your prayer to the world, fix my world. Nobody comes. You're just lying there. You're just crying. Nobody comes. I don't know how well you guys remember any of this, but when nobody comes, something starts to happen. It's a really unusual thing. It's a quieting down in your realization, nobody's coming. Crying isn't working. You got nothing, no mechanism at all. All you have is waiting, sitting quietly. But what happens when you wait and sit quietly? Well, my memory, going back to that period, is you go, and you feel held. It's not being held by your mom, not being held by your dad. You're being held by something primitive, primordial, ancient, quieting, comforting, loving, that is, in a way, just there. It's like always there. But when you're always going out into the outer to get it, you get frustrated half the time because it doesn't come when you want it, the way you want it, how you want it. You know, it finds its own, it becomes the world for you. It's a struggle. Most life, in a way, is a struggle. But the real practice and the real importance here is that deep inside, some part of you knows how to go back and surrender, give up looking for the world to deliver it. Don't ask for God to bring it to you from the outer. It's inside. The whole practice, meditative life, Rudy's practice particularly, carries us deep into that space. And if you really do work at it and you let go, the familiar holding pattern of being loved and cared for re-announces itself. And what's really interesting is you lose your story and you lose your mind. You enter the world of, whatever you want to call it, old age, Alzheimer's, dementia, all those things where you think the thing you need to rely on for comfort and holding, and even the ability to ask for help, disappears. Like you are abandoned by your body, your personality, your mind, your story, just gone. And that feels in a way cruel, but it's not. Because what you go back to and what you return to is the infant that you have always been. This still pointed being that has no idea of its name, what it's doing, where it is, how it got here, where it's going, nothing. It just knows one thing: hold me. And when it doesn't come from the outer, it remembers at that moment how to find it, because the outer is not working anymore. It just goes back to its default position, which is, I am held. I am held. And there is perhaps a greater default position, which is there's no me in it. There's just this extraordinary whatever that is. And, we can give it names if we want, but I don't know that that helps. But I think the important teaching here, which came from the rabbi, which came from this Talmudic teaching for me yesterday, was that prayer is not about fixing or changing the world. Prayer is about asking for help to accept the what is of your being, of asking God for help to find your holding position, the joy, the love, the sweetness, whatever it may be, that allows you to exist in this world on a day-to-day level. And it comes. From my experience, it comes. And, when there's no you left to ask, or the mind isn't able to do it, it's just there. It's there. So I have a great faith, and sitting in the temple yesterday, sitting is a good word because half the time you're standing, which every religion has, it's either you're bowing down on the ground or you're sitting cross-legged for days, or you're standing and sitting. Whatever it is that you're doing something called worship, and you're doing something called, reaching out to the universe and to God. But the teaching is, as you reach out for God, stop it. It's not where it's coming from. The biggest reaching, in a way, is reaching for God to send you inward, to go in, to go back to where you come from. Go back to where you come from. And that is where you've always been, and it has never gone away. The baby in the crib is still there. And if you watch people like my sister-in-law and me and Blanche, the journey back into that space is underway. And I promise all of you, as you get older, there'll be different versions of this, but you will all be retreating into this space, and the mind events that used to take care of you are no longer going to be servicing you, and you won't like that. There's a lot of discord in that, but slowly even that falls away, and then there's just, I mean, this is the ideal version. I can't do a blanket, this is how it is for anybody, but we all have our ride into the future of our lives, and the future of our lives are, in a way, filled with miracle, but the miracle is not one achieved in the parting of the Red Sea. The miracle is the parting of your own heart into your own depth of being and your own sense of self and your own comfort in that the universe that gave you your birth and your life and your amazing ability to know and be part of one another's lives is taking you back into its core. And that's a ride we're all on. And in a way, the parting of that sea is this great miracle of our lives. We go back to the simplicity, elemental reality of our lives. And, as a teacher, I kind of watch everybody, and I look at people and I watch people through the eyes of that kind of inner space in a way, and not to, not, I was telling Blanche that I felt like I'm the janitor who's washing, just washing down everything, sending water into this place and filling that and filling that. There's nothing hierarchical about it. But what does comes is how much water each plant needs, or each pail needs, or whatever it is you're filling. And you go and you do what has to be done. But what you see in people is, a level of acceptance and openness and availability, or a lack of that, a displacement. Even people who've been sitting meditating for years and years, are able to take the nourishment and go whoop, over here, over there, anywhere but in, anywhere but to where it needs to go. And I see it over and over, that the things that need to be, in a sense, nurtured, altered, expanded, or let go of, are not. And, there's a part of the Bruce guy who can feel judgmental and go, what are they, when are they going to figure this out? And then there's a part of the Bruce guy that gets out of the way and goes, it's not your job. That's not your choice. It's not your call. Your job is water. If it drinks the water, it drinks it. If it grows, it grows. If it doesn't grow, it doesn't grow. But your job is to come there repeatedly and offer what you can to help it nurture and evolve into what it wants to be. You individually, each of you, are responsible for drinking. And the water's there all the time. Sometimes you come to a class and there's somebody doing it for you. The other time is you sit by yourself, you go for a walk, you stop what you're doing, and you just go open. And the other thing you can do, which I have become more and more adept at, I guess, you can talk to your creator. I've talked about this before, but let me just say one more time. You don't have to just sit in silence. You don't have to offer silent prayer. You can just have an open, complete open dialogue with your maker and just go, I'm here. And talk about where you're at and what you're going through and what's going on. It's better than any shrink or psychiatrist, because you're really kind of heard in a way. Nothing is said, but the answers kind of float through by speaking. And the larger force of the universe, which is so abstract and so hard to grasp in a way, but you can talk to it. And in a way, we are all the time talking to this greater thing, whether we know it or not, because each of us are a manifestation of it. So when I talk to you, or I talk to Blanche, or I talk to my grandchildren, I'm talking to it. But in the car, when I'm driving or walking along the street, I go and I talk directly. And you feel like an idiot, and you're it's kind of crazy, but I know I need to do it. And I have a sense that I'm heard. And I've described this a while ago, and so some of you who listened to the talks heard it. But at one point, I just said to the universe, to God, I said, how are you doing? And that was amazing. That was amazing because it's a dialogue. It's not just me asking for stuff. It's me expressing my concern and love for the totality. And it offered me an embrace in that moment that is so much, again, this idea of being held. It's an idea of being held by that which is always there. And having a dialogue, not just a monologue, with this thing, asking and receiving are very important ingredients. And if you start to put all this into practice and you start to do your own inner work, so you spend time going into these spaces that are so locked and muted and sort of malformed in so many ways, just go into those spaces and let this thing work for you. You will have a life that will be miraculous, and the Red Sea inside you will part, and you will find your way into the reeds of your life. You will find your way into the space that comes up to your nostrils, and you will go, oh, I'm still here. And you will keep walking through that, and it may not part for you, but it will allow you passage to wherever it is you're supposed to go. So I'm very grateful I went to that bat mitzvah. I'm very grateful you guys have come here today. We learn as we go. It keeps on unfolding. That's all I can tell you. It's an amazing journey. It has the miracle within it. And we are, in a way, the miracle for each other. And if we understand that, we will honor that as often as possible. So, my talk. Any questions? Yeah, TJ.
I just want to thank you, Bruce. That was very hit deep. You know, I just wrote down being held, the journey from infant to infinite. It seems like a lot to contemplate there, and that insight was very beautiful. I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce,
Yes.
Dale.
Okay, I can't see you all because you're on two screens right now, so just talk.
Okay. I listen to all your talks often
Oh, Dale.
from years back, and I think that talk is one of the most beautiful you've ever given. It really, really speaks to me.
I'm grateful. You know, I mean, I'm not. I felt yesterday when I was sitting in the Jewish temple, a reconnection to things that I used to not care about all that much. They always felt somewhat artificial, and still did, I have to say. And sitting in the, the standing, the sitting, the praising, all of that stuff. But every so often, a truth comes through, and if you're open, and if you've had years of practice and connection, that which resonates in a big way will be very much announced to you. And you will then bring it into your life, whether you become articulate and speak it to other people, or whether you just give someone a hug or hold somebody for a moment. You will express that truth. And it comes at you all the time. But the unspoken thing that I didn't really get at was the nature of family, and family from years ago. And I had my people yesterday, cousins who I haven't seen in a long time. And I will tell you, reuniting with those forces is really, really beautiful. So when you get to share the stories and all the stories you haven't heard before, and the new ones and the revisions and all of that, you start to get a sense of what's really meaningful and important in life. And it's each other. It's why we're here. And you're not the center. You are not the center. Wait.
So my question, I didn't get to the question.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead, Dale.
So I used to pray to sort of nothing that was real, but it didn't have a face. It didn't have it had a name, God, but it was so huge. And now, since I have known you and Rudy, I have Rudy's face on the wallpaper on my iPad. Because I can look into his eyes and I can say, Rudy, sort me out. And in a way, and I feel that way about you. So, when I pray, help me to surrender, the thought comes to me, am I putting Bruce and Rudy in front of what I used to think was God?
Well, let me.
And do I need to surrender that, or am I just to just keep enjoying it? I mean, I get a direct answer from Rudy. Sometimes he'll say, it's like he's saying, "Oh, for God's sake, you know what to do," and
I agree
very
with you.
terse and very much I know, just wake up, you know what to do. So
that was good. Yeah, let me just say that one, I agree with you completely, but two, to go back to the metaphor of the janitor and the hose, it's the water that nurtures you. It's not the person holding the hose, but the person holding the hose is helpful in the journey.
Yeah.
And if you give the hose and the person holding it names, that's fine. But the reality is the water that comes through, and that you get nurtured, and you do.
Yeah.
I see it in you all the time. So it doesn't matter. We don't have to get intellectual about all of this. When I'm talking to the powers that be, I don't have an image at all.
I don't either.
Yeah, it's
I
just
don't have an image.
there is, but I will tell you, and I know this, and it's whatever I know in life, I just know it hears, and on occasion, when there's a dialogue happening, it responds. Often more than when there's a dialogue, but there is a sense of this. I mean, I cannot say it more than that. It's not an abstraction to me. It is a real thing, and it is so deep and so profound that it's worth a lifetime of sitting, trying to connect to whatever that is. You're never disconnected, but it's just trying to make the mind and the persona in alignment. If you can do that. If you can't, it doesn't mean it's not there, it's not working. But if you can, boy, does it change the ride. And that's kind of what it's about. It's just a more loving ride. It's a more familial, tapestral, connection with other, which is really beautiful, and self.
Definitely.
Wait.
Thank you.
And the people aren't the water, right?
What?
The people aren't the water.
No.
The water's the water.
Water's the water.
Water is.
Bruce,
That's not the people.
That's right. No,
It's the water.
but the people might hand you a glass.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bruce,
Hold on a second. I've got someone talking here.
My thought goes along the same way when you're talking about getting it from, bringing it out from inside, or going someplace to try to get it in from the outside. Like my own example is, I'm sitting, daily for months. I haven't been here in a few months, and I got a little flow going. It feels pretty good. But when I come in, it's like I gotta say, Bruce, you're like a water cannon. It's like it really, really opens me up. Or even like the example of, you're doing your thing, you go to a mitzvah, and all of a sudden the rabbi says something that opens up to you, or, kind of feeds you that same way. So it's like, I get it, I guess it does come from inside. There are some places where you can go to get what you need.
There are, but when you can't, it's like the baby in the crib crying and getting nothing, and then lying there going, oh, well, and then suddenly, oh, it's there. It's just there. And I know you long enough to know it's there. So, to me, it's like, yes, it's great to get picked up and hugged and fed and, get a Hershey bar, whatever it is that people can give you in the world. But it's when all that's gone, or when you're lying in pain, or you're going through all these other things, it doesn't mean that the universe is going to come and take care of you at that point. It's going to be this inner thing that does care for you, really cares for you all the time in depth, and will be available. I believe, up to the point of, forgive me, I do this pretty often. Christ on the cross didn't feel so cared for. It was painful. It was really painful, and couldn't find it. But then he looked to the other, which was interesting. He looked outwardly, said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." But who did he say? Who was he talking to at that point? That which is forgiving. And that changed the equation for him. And that's when he let go and allowed himself to be taken home. So there's a real, there's so many lessons to be learned here, but they're all so simple. And in the end, either we're learning them or we're not. One way or the other, it's still working. So you can have the ride in the world and enjoy it and grow from it, or you can miss it entirely. I've watched people do that. And I guess at that last millisecond, they get connected to this. But the difference between a life without it and a life with it is enormous. And if you have it in your life, it is like, well, it's like a gift. It's just phenomenal. But there was somebody else asking a question. I don't know who.
It was me,
I can't
Kathy.
see- Who?
Kathy Ward.
Kathy. Okay, you're not on the screen, but just talk. I'll see if I can find you.
Okay, I
Go
just
for
wanted to share that any number of times when I've been in a dark place, I have experienced exactly what you're talking about, being held, even being rocked and comforted, and just feeling like I was sitting in the lap of of a grandma or somebody who was just there to comfort me.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, there's a difference between being conscious of that and not being conscious of that. You know, and I think it happens to a lot of people. So going to sleep at night, so if you get to go to sleep at night, you know,
Yeah.
can give you a lot of that feeling, you know, like the whole, everything disappears. You're just brought back into that comfort zone. But
Yeah.
it's really to be able to allow that experience to come through. And if there's a possibility of acknowledging where it's coming from, then you have what I experience is called a great gratitude,
Yeah.
extraordinary
Yeah.
gratitude. And you just say thank you.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple thing in the end. But, you know, how many people do you know walk around saying thank you? I don't know. I mean, maybe a lot, but for me, it's not always visible. Yes, Sarah.
Can I just share?
Mhm.
I mean, it's relevant, I think. I don't know, I read something, started reading this book called Gaia Alchemy recently. I don't know if anybody knows anything about Gaia, but it's a branch of science that believes we're an interconnected being with the universe. It's really fascinating. And within the first chapter, he wrote something along the lines of, we're already living in an artificial world. And I thought about that, and I thought about like all the strip malls and the structures we've built and the ways in which our world is already augmented and already virtual in a way. It's already a construction of our own minds. And it's been a real like eye-opening concept for me. And I'm like, why am I wearing clothes? Like, you know, it's all of it's artificial except that raw, naked self. And I don't know, for me, how I've always thought about it is that when I go into those places, I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to myself in the mirror. I'm talking to my own courage, sense of courage to opt into that action. And this idea that we're in conversation, as you were speaking before, there was a whole group of deer that came running by, and they talked about that in this book about, you know, we are in context all the time. We're in context with, and we don't talk about that ever, but of course you're going to feel closer to your true self in the presence of somebody who you feel sees you. It helps bring you there. And so I love what you're saying, and it really resonates for me. And I've been struggling with the places. How do you build the life that allows you to be grounded and that allows you to live in such a way you can find that easily?
Well, are you guys able to hear any of that? A little bit, okay. I can't reconstruct it completely, but let me talk about Gaia and the world of AI, which is kind of maybe that we're all artificial intelligence creations in a way. And there, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. And I wrote this movie Brainstorm years ago, which was basically that very statement, but the director cut out that part of the movie. So it was left, yeah. The AI universe, and I'm not going to go into a whole talk here, does present other ways of looking at what we're in and what this is. And I don't know that there is an easy answer to that, except for the fact that it so repositions our thinking about what life is and who we are and how it all comes about. And that's a really important thing. On the other hand, imagine all of that being taken away, thought, narrative, story about AI, about not AI, about Christian belief, about Islamic belief, about Jewish belief. You take all of that away, and the questions you're asking now would become much simpler, because they wouldn't even be questions. You wouldn't be able to call AI, you wouldn't be able to reference anything. There's still going to be this physical not knowing thing, which is what starts to happen, at least in my experience.
And what's around you.
And what's around you, but even that may become perceived differently. You may not be able to see it, you may not be able to hear it. Blanche and I are going through those kinds of things. Blanche more than me, you be in a whole room with people at a bat mitzvah and you don't hear a word anyone says. Very different experience than if you're actually hearing. So what's going on here is that, we build a world and then we take it apart in our mind, but at some point the mind is taken apart and the world we built has no meaning at all. So everything you're saying, as interesting as it is, then what? Then what? That's when this stuff really kicks in. It's like, and I honestly, my biggest response to life, my mother-in-law's response to life is, I don't know. Yes, I mean, I think what you're talking about is very valid and very real. And we're watching AI possibly taking over the world in the next 5 or 10 years. Who knows? It's coming so fast. So quickly, because I think we're talking way too long.
Oh, okay.
So we can talk privately.
Yeah.
So guys, I don't want to hold you all here. The only thing I want to say before I sign off is, in 2 weeks from today, we will be 3 days before Rudy's Samadhi, his 50th Samadhi. Rudy's 50th Samadhi is the anniversary of his passing. I can't believe it's been half a century. We're still sitting here talking about Rudy, which is amazing. Whether that will go on for another half century, I don't know. But I would like to do the class in 2 weeks about Rudy. I hear people in the background, or am I hearing myself? I don't know. But what I would like is to offer all of you an opportunity to come and sit in person here, if you would like, and then to sit in this chair, talk about your experiences with Rudy, or even in not having known him, or do it online as well through Zoom, and to open the class up to East Coast, West Coast. I don't know if it can work or how it will work, but it's 2 weeks from now. If you come up here, if you make the effort to come here, we'll have a cake of some kind and we'll all gather together and we'll celebrate Rudy's passing. Celebrate is the wrong word. I keep going back and forth with it. We'll honor it. We'll honor his passing. He has impacted us and me and many of us for 50 years. That's extraordinary. So if you're available and you're able to show up in a group setting, that would be lovely. If not, if you can show up online, we will have everyone who wants to speak say 2 minutes or whatever of how Rudy has impacted their lives, just to say thank you, whatever it may be. I don't know how that's going to play, but we'll try it. And so I welcome you, those of you who can make it, to be here. I do have Bob and Cinta, Joseph and Cinta, excuse me, coming all the way, flying here to be part of it. So if anybody wants to be here, you're welcome. I love you all. Thank you for today. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.